As one would have expected, this is a very interesting, thought-provoking paper, cutting edge, full of novel ideas and rich results. What I have to offer here is just a brief summary and then some 2 or 3 comments, possibly for extensions. So the motivation for the paper is that policymaking is usually done by both politicians and bureaucrats. And the question is what type of task each of these types is better positioned to perform. How to allocate policy making between politicians and bureaucrats. At least for me, a good motivating example is provided by this thing. Yes, Minister, a wonderful example of interaction between politicians and bureaucrats, and maybe we can get some insights for how to address the situation from this movie. So the basic ingredients in the model is that the basic assumption is that incentives that politicians and bureaucrats face differ. And in some sense, the bureaucrats are held to a higher performance standard. Politicians, P, I call them here populists, their objective is just to please the average voter. If they don't succeed in pleasing the average voter, then they are replaced and somebody else is, another politician is reappointed instead. A bureaucrat, a B, for best performance here, is driven by career concerns, as in the previous work by Holmstrom and Duat-Ripont and others. So in some sense, all that drives politicians is just to achieving some threshold utility level for an average voter, but bureaucrats are really highly motivated in this framework. Now, in both cases, voters in this paper are identical, so in some sense, what matters in this paper is objective performance. So this paper focuses very much on issues of incentives, how to measure objectively performance and so forth, and some other aspects which might be relevant for politics at least, such as norms, values, ideology, are really ignored here. And this framework does lead to a rich set of results. Many of these results really are being driven by the basic assumption that politicians and bureaucrats face somewhat different incentives. So, for example, distribution of abilities matters, social preferences, lobbying plays an important role as to allocation of tasks between politicians and bureaucrats. The paper comes with very clear-cut prescription almost. Who should be a politician, who should be a bureaucrat? This is almost psychological analysis of who fits this job and who fits the other job. So I have just a few comments. One that I know that the authors are fully aware about is that gray areas are abundant. And distinctions between politicians and bureaucrats really are often very much loose. I was trying to think about Israeli politics when I was reading the paper. It's a good testing ground for many of the predictions here. So in Israel, especially nowadays, politics is in a huge turmoil, and there is a lot of moving around going on. So politicians, for example, oftentimes seek a CEO job after finishing their stint. So they are motivated not solely by pleasing the average voter, but they also have some career concerns. They do want, or we want to think that they do want, to appear being competent. In contrast, politicians oftentimes have some career concerns. For example, a local politician may strive to become a nationally elected one, so he wants to appear more competent. Oh, this is also politicians. Okay, so these are just examples of politicians who want to appear competent. In contrast, bureaucrats oftentimes think about future political career. In Israel, for example, many army generals become politicians in the future. My university president wants to become a politician. So there are many instances of moving around, both politicians becoming bureaucrats and vice versa. And these may affect their incentives, they affect their objectives. It's not that politicians are solely motivated by pleasing average voter or bureaucrats are solely motivated by a career. There is a mix of considerations. Perhaps more importantly, politicians and bureaucrats work as a team, work in tandem. So in this paper, it's just this or that. It would be an interesting, I think, extension to have a model where they complement each other in some sense. So these two types coexist, and usually it is the case, as in the last part of the paper perhaps, but I haven't read. This is probably based on another paper that I haven't had an access to, about the positive element. Bureaucrats are usually subordinates of politicians, and I think this is something that may be a useful extension, to have a model where the two complement each other. The objectives may differ, as in the last part, the positive analysis, and yet they can potentially usefully complement each other. So there are advantages of having both of them instead of this or that. So like in this Yes Minister series, they work together, albeit imperfectly. Finally, and this seems to me also a little bit important, possibly a future extension, on top of this incentive contractual aspect, there is significant normative component, as we know from much other work in political economy. So actions do not only affect some objectively measured outcomes, like average income in this paper, but also entail some trade-offs. Income distribution, for example, may present some such trade-off. And therefore, normative issues, ideology, social beliefs, and so forth, become important and hardly distinguishable in some cases from objective measures of performance. For example, a central banker, this is a canonical example for a bureaucrat used in the paper. Suppose that a central banker, again, this is all from Israeli recent reality, a central banker raises interest rates, resisting popular pressure. There are two interpretations for this. One is that he is well versed in monetary policy, he knows his job, he's competent, or he is insensitive to social issues. Another example, Prime Minister has stubbornly pursued a political move contrary to his subscribed ideology, which it was believed could be popular and turned out to be hugely successful. Interpretations, he could be a populist, or he was competent, he could see through. So what I'm trying to say is that it is a little bit difficult to distinguish between a person being competent, driven by some objective measures of performance, or being driven by some ideological normative considerations, and having some mix of both motives could be useful. So this is indeed this last point, that a useful extension, in my view, would incorporate norms and political preferences, like maybe in more traditional political economy model, alongside with this performance and incentives considerations. And this extension may generate, indeed, politicians and bureaucrats working together in tandem, complementing each other in some way. Okay, I enjoyed it. Very interesting.